Now we will discuss the part of speech called the preposition. Please turn to page 18 in your book. A preposition is defined as a word that precedes a noun or pronoun to form an adjectival or adverbial phrase. The definition is clunky but accurate. Please be sure not to confuse prepositions with adverbs. Use your dictionary. Very often, the same words can serve in different examples or different cases as either prepositions or adverbs. This can be a little bit confusing sometimes, but you'll get used to seeing prepositions because prepositions create phrases. They create groups of words that have to go together, that form units. Adverbs don't. So prepositions create phrases that link together, that stay together, and work as if they were one adjective, just one word, or one adverb, just one word. So we'll talk about this in a moment, but just keep in mind that a prepositional phrase is a group of words that can act as one adjective or one adverb. You can look back to the beginning of the book to remind yourself of the definition of a phrase. A phrase is, in fact, a group of words that stays together, that forms a unit, and acts as one part of speech. This is simply one kind of phrase, one special kind of phrase that has a name, the prepositional phrase. It is one name of one group of words that forms a unit that can act as if it were just one single word and one part of speech. So if we look to the first example on the page, we have a preposition in an adjectival prepositional phrase. I like burgers with cheese. With cheese includes two words. This is a phrase, a group of words that stays together and that acts as an adjective, as if it were one word. With is the preposition, the word that precedes or in some way introduces the cheese. It doesn't describe the cheese. An adjective would do that. It simply introduces it. It brings us to the cheese. So with cheese. Cheese is what we call the object of the preposition. It is in fact the noun or pronoun that is introduced. An object is a thing. That's what the word object means, so it needs to be a pronoun or a noun. So with cheese is our prepositional phrase. What I would like you to do in the homework is tell me which each phrase describes. So we would want to add then to this example, I like burgers with cheese. I would like you to simply say that this is an adjectival prepositional phrase, and you can certainly abbreviate that however you like, so long as you're clear. It is an adjectival prepositional phrase describing burgers. What kind of burgers? Burgers with cheese. It is an adjectival phrase because it describes the word burgers, which is a noun. Adjectives describe nouns, or in some cases pronouns. Another test to see that you have an adjectival rather than an adverbial prepositional phrase is to try to make that phrase into an attributive adjective. So for example, we could say, instead of I like burgers with cheese, I like cheeseburgers. That makes perfect sense, and in fact, that's often what we would usually tend to say in this case. I like cheeseburgers. And that gives you a very clear sense of how this phrase, in fact, is working as if it's one word, as if it is one part of speech, as if it is one adjective. So again, the trick that works quite often actually, not all the time, to see whether you have an adjectival phrase rather than an adverbial phrase is to see if somehow you can make that phrase into an attributive adjective that you put right in front of the noun or pronoun you want to describe. So with cheese, can that be made into some sort of attributive adjective? Sure, I like cheeseburgers. English tends very often to want to to make prepositional phrases into attributive adjectives. The language has developed that way. And another reason that I'd like you to pay some careful attention to prepositional phrases is that weak writers tend to overuse them. Prepositional phrases can create some pretty awful train ride-like sentences. They're very, very much overused and carelessly overused when in fact often, certainly not always, but often attributive adjectives would be better. So for example, we could say something like, I went to school in the morning on the bus with my mother after breakfast before brushing my teeth yesterday. And that's just a nonsensical sentence. But I often see in weak writers a sort of rampant overuse of prepositional phrases. So be on the lookout for them. We certainly use them, and they're certainly often necessary. I'm talking about the overuse and the careless use of them. Okay, let's look to the second example of a preposition in an adverbial prepositional phrase. The example reads, I play golf in the summer. Our prepositional phrase here is in the summer. Understand these phrases always as beginning with the preposition and ending with the object of the preposition. In this case, beginning with the preposition in and ending with the noun summer. In between, we can have any number of other descriptive words that point to the noun. In this case, we have one additional word, an adjective, the, which is what kind of adjective? As you know, a definite article. We can have that thrown in. We could also have in the worst summer. That doesn't really make sense. But we can throw in any other number of adverbs or adjectives in between the preposition that opens the phrase and the noun or pronoun that closes it. So keep that in mind, especially as you turn to the homework. I've specifically added additional adverbs and adjectives between the prepositions and the objects of the prepositions. Certainly not in every case, but I've added them so that you'll get used to seeing them. Anyway, back to this example. In the summer, you should mark each part of speech and then say that it is an adverbial prepositional phrase. And again, you can abbreviate that however you like. So in the summer, I'm telling you right now that it's adverbial. You'd have to think about that. But why is it an adverb? In what way is that phrase, is that group of words, working like an adverb? It is describing when I play. It is describing the verb play. Adverbs tend to describe, and you have this in your book, when, why, how, and so on. I play in the summer. So you would say in the homework and on your exams, in the summer, of course you would identify each part of speech. Then you should underline it and say that it is a prepositional phrase, an adverbial prepositional phrase. Then you would tell me which word in the sentence it's describing, or which group of words. In this sentence, in the summer describes play. So you could say something like, as you've been doing in the homework, adverbial prepositional phrase equals play. Because it works, that is to say, an adverbial prepositional phrase works just as if it were one adverb. All right. One way to test to see that you have an adverbial phrase, and again, this doesn't always work, but it often works, is to see if you can move the phrase around. See if you can put it in another part of the sentence. This is not the same trick as adjectival phrases, about which I've already told you. This is a different kind of trick that works often for adverbial phrases. See if you can move the entire phrase to another part of the sentence and still have the same sentence. Still have a sentence that says the same thing, if not exactly in the same way. So for example, I play golf in the summer could in fact be read or expressed as in the summer, comma, I play golf. We can move that entire adverbial prepositional phrase to another part of the sentence and yet still have the same sentence. A sentence saying the same exact thing. If you can do that, that usually means that you have an adverbial prepositional phrase. You could not do that with the first example, with the adjectival phrase. It would just be odd. We couldn't say, for example, with cheese, comma, I like burgers. Unless we're doing, we're using a kind of Yoda speak. Remember Yoda from Star Wars? Yoda inverted the pieces and parts of sentences all the time. We can't, unless we're being intentionally funny, or of course creative, or writing lyrics, or making things fit in some way. If we want simply to utter an everyday sentence and not to stand out, we would never say with cheese I like burgers. We'd say I like burgers with cheese. Back to that final example, I play golf in the summer. We certainly could, under any normal circumstance, say in the summer I play golf. It means exactly the same thing. We've said nothing odd. So that's a test to see if you have an adverbial prepositional phrase. Okay, so that's all I have to say about that, except to say that when you first identify or begin to practice identifying these prepositional phrases, they can sometimes be a little tricky. It can sometimes be a little tricky to determine what exactly a prepositional phrase is describing, whether it's pointing to some noun or some verb or so on. And that is always the case. Sometimes these are so close and so difficult to call that I'll give you credit for either. This is certainly not always the case, but sometimes they're incredibly close. Sometimes speakers are not terribly clear with their placements of prepositional phrases, and so we're not exactly sure where they go or what they point to. So just be aware of that, and be aware in your own writing to be careful about where you place prepositional phrases, to be sure that your reader knows exactly what you want to say. Okay, best of luck with the homework.